Hello, I'm Kelda Yoon. The heat and humidity today have brought with it the potential for some severe weather. There are several tornado watches in effect for areas surrounding the GTA, and there could be some thunderstorms in store for us here. Let's get right to it and bring in meteorologist Colette Kennedy. And Colette, what do people need to know?
Yeah, Kelda, eventually we will see some of this activity, or at least the remnants of these storms, making their way into the city. But for now, all eyes a little bit further north to where that active weather is, and that risk of severe has, of course, been high. You mentioned heat and humidity. Those are some of the ingredients. We've got some wind shear in here as well, a cold front coming in, so kind of all the ingredients there. It's more like isolated severe, though, when you get down closer to the lakeshore and, as I say, kind of in towards the city. Tornado watch has been in place through much of the day just to the north of the city here where we've been seeing it, but it does include places like Newmarket and Orangeville. You're in this region stretching all the way up towards Barrie and Midland. Just keeping in mind that a watch means conditions favorable for tornadoes to develop. A warning means we have a warned cell, or it looks like a tornado on the ground, or at least on radar. That signature is there. So we do have those storms. Those are well off towards the east there. And then you come back and look at just where we have some of these cells that are popping. Areas in yellow, severe thunderstorm watch. Again, conditions favorable, but where we get into the reds on my graphic here, that's where we're looking at some cells that are warnings associated with. So you do need to really use extreme caution through these regions. The Bruce Peninsula, I'm pointing out at the moment, we had a stronger cell 2 here that was just towards the south of Bancroft. That's continuing to track eastward. What can you expect with these? Toonie to golf ball sized hail. That risk is there. Wind gusts exceeding 90 kilometers an hour. So there are some power outages, but we could see more associated with some of these storms. Always that risk of a tornado, of course, but some heavy downpours and lightning in here as well. So this is the latest. That's kind of been just what's been forming just ahead of that cold front as it moves through the region. And then taking a broader view so you can just see how active this is. And much of it has been well to the north. That energy earlier in Timmins, a tornado warning there. And, you know, Environment Canada will investigate, but it looks quite likely that there was a tornado earlier today in that region. So we got to show you everything that's going to be happening here and timing this out. I say it is going to be coming our way towards the GTA or further in, but that's looking like it's going to be later and later this evening. So between like 8 or after 8, towards 9, 10, 11 o'clock, and breaking down by that point, losing the energy from the sun as the sun will be setting. So it'll be kind of remnants that are going through. Isolated severe possible, but I'm not expecting it as much for the city. We're seeing this action this evening just a bit further north. Our current temperatures still sitting at 30 degrees. How about our humidex at 34? And back into southwestern Ontario, 37. That's how it feels right now in Windsor. If it's a bit too much for folks, tomorrow we are going to cool down a bit and this will all calm down. But it is a preview, Kelda, of what is coming next week, and it will not be a one-day only event then.
All right, we'll check back in with you a little bit later. Thanks so much, Colette.
Sounds good.
To a CBC Toronto investigation now, which has found that supposed leaders of a marketing company run by a member of the Toronto Police Services Board might not actually exist. Sarah McMillan breaks it all down.
She says she's a graduate of Ivy League Columbia University, a marketing expert, a former senior global executive at Nestle. But despite her online presence, Mary Ellen Steinem might not actually exist. Images on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all stock photos. For more than a decade, she apparently worked as COO of Toronto-based marketing company Brand EQ, and on social media would cheer on her boss, Brand EQ CEO Nadine Spencer. Toronto's Nadine Spencer has run Brand EQ for more than a decade, and since last year has sat on Toronto's Police Services Board. Mary Ellen Steinem is just one example we found on Brand EQ's website over the years of employees who appear to be fabricated, or at the very least, misrepresented. Steinem's LinkedIn page says she's lived in New York for the last 3 decades, but personal record searches turned up 0 results for her in New York State or anywhere in the U.S. There are no property records, phone numbers, voter registration, utility bills, or any other records in her name. We brought what we found to a number of marketing experts and business professors who say misrepresenting company employees is not normal industry practice.
That certainly seems at least to have the potential to mislead the public, to mislead potential business partners, potential clients.
Along with Steinem, there's also someone called Lawrence Lightman, for years the client liaison. The photo used to represent him is of a real person, but not a Brand EQ employee. It's actually a doctor in Australia named James Churchill. We located Dr. Churchill, who confirmed to us in an email that it is a photo of him and that he has never had contact with Brand EQ, let alone ever worked there. Through her lawyer, Spencer categorically denied that Steinem and Lightman are fabricated. She declined to provide any evidence they exist, citing confidential employee information, and did not answer our repeated questions about why they were represented using stock images and a photo of a real doctor with no connection to the company. Spencer said the part of the website where they appeared until recently was archival content and not meant for public view, though we found both photos were used on the site since 2013. They were taken down after we contacted Spencer in the last 2 weeks. Then there's this photo, which was used to represent a senior company employee since 2020. It's actually a photo of a U.S. fashion designer. In that case, Spencer said the website page was under construction and was using template content. She didn't answer our question about why the photo was used for more than 3.5 years. Spencer noted she stepped aside from leading her company for 2 years while she served as CEO of the Black Business and Professional Association, a Toronto-based charity. Her lawyer said in a statement to us that the issues we raised happened when Brand EQ was managed by other individuals. However, all the photos and employees we asked her about were on the site before she stepped aside temporarily in 2021. I spoke with marketing professor Ronika Alawalia, who says there can be a temptation for small businesses to try to make themselves seem bigger than they really are. But she says company owners need to make ethical decisions, to be honest and transparent.
And saying, okay, this is where I draw the line. If we are two people, I'm happy to showcase what we bring to the table rather than showcasing a great lineup of legendary celebrity team members to boast of.
Nadine Spencer is one of 7 people on Toronto's Police Service Board, in charge of overseeing the budget and operation of the country's largest municipal police service. The Provincial Code of Conduct says police board members shall not conduct themselves in a manner that undermines or is likely to undermine the public's trust in the Police Service Board or the police service. Alok Mukherjee is a former chair of the board. Speaking generally, he said public perception is always key.
Every police service board has to be very, very attentive to its reputation and its credibility. And to that end, it has to be proactive.
The City of Toronto website's profile of Spencer describes her company as a leading global agency. The city did not answer our questions about whether it ever verified those claims or if it's concerned that a board member may have misrepresented the scale of her business. A representative for the police board told us that any code of conduct investigation would be handled by the province's Inspector General of Policing should a formal complaint be made. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.
There are new questions being raised today about facial recognition technology as it is adopted by more Canadian police services. Thomas Daglet looks at one man's experience and why some are urging caution.
He looks nothing like him. Looks nothing like him.
Niger Parks and his mother endured a nightmare when he spent 10 days in jail in 2019 for a theft and assault he didn't commit. Through facial recognition technology, a picture of the suspect taken from a fake driver's license matched with a photo of Parks. Police in New Jersey arrested and charged him days later.
When you first saw the picture they used, what went through your mind?
I was like, he in my head, he doesn't look anything like me. So it was just weird. I'm like, so he basically telling me we all look alike.
The software that led to that mismatch was developed by French tech firm Idemia, and that same facial recognition system has now come to Ontario.
What measures are in place to prevent that from happening here?
Again, it's the human element to the software in that we're going to look at the match and see if that supports other evidence that we've obtained.
Since late May, investigators in York and Peel regions near Toronto have been using the software to compare crime scene images against mugshots from a database. It comes 10 years after Calgary police became the first in Canada to deploy a facial recognition system.
We waited until that technology improved for those exact reasons, and that is why we did go with IDEMIA.
Studies have suggested facial recognition software is more prone to misidentify racialized people. In this presentation, IDEMIA insisted its algorithm has the same false match rate for black or white subjects, male or female. But this researcher has concerns.
And because of how high the risks are of a person's freedom to be limited, in this case, it doesn't make sense to use technology that automates the decisions.
With all charges against him dropped, Parks has this message for police in Ontario.
There's clear evidence that it doesn't work.
He's launched a lawsuit blaming his wrongful arrest on the misuse of what he considers biased technology. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Riders on one of Toronto's busiest streetcar routes will have to start boarding buses beginning next Sunday. The TTC says the dedicated streetcar lane along Spadina Avenue will be shut down to accommodate some major improvements. Replacement buses will be deployed to take commuters who normally use the 510 line. As Chris Glover reports, it's only temporary, but it'll likely be until the end of the year.
Starting June 23rd, the dedicated streetcar on Spadina is gone. Instead, buses will take the load of the 510.
Not fun. I take this every day, come from very far. It's already packed on the streetcar. I don't know what's going to happen with the bus.
More trouble, more traffic jam.
It's going to be a pain, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to be worth it because we're going to have a better system.
The TTC says the tracks are getting a renewal and the overhead power network is being modernized. When the streetcars are out of commission, riders will have to take the replacement buses down Spadina to Queens Quay and hop on that streetcar to head over to Union. At Spadina Station, track improvements are also being done to accommodate a future platform extension. And here's the thing, the Spadina streetcar shutdown is expected to last until the end of the year.
It's surprising to see that, like Canada take very long time, especially when it comes to construction and all those things. Because where I'm from, this could be done in maybe 2 or 3 months.
What do you think of that timeline?
I did not know that. This is news to me. Bad news for sure. It's summer. I work with kids, so I'm going to be here all day, every day, from the morning to the evening. Extremely inconveniencing. I'm probably going to walk.
It's all added commuter frustration in a city with lots of that already. Recent data shows the years-long construction on the Gardiner has increased travel times a whopping 250% in the morning rush hour. Plus, part of Queen is still closed in the downtown for the next few years while the Ontario line is built. And the list of closures and projects goes on.
When things are at an age that needs to be fixed, we have to do it. So that's why TTC has been given a mandate to proceed with the overhead wires and all the tracks.
So the community has been told of the potentially painful changes coming to Spadina Avenue. The TTC has sent out 23,000 mailers in English and Chinese to some of the area businesses and residents. And they'll also have customer service reps stationed along the route to help people find the new bus stops that they're just now installing.
I think there's usually a little bit of a learning curve for people, but it's people will have a hard time, and some people can figure it out quickly, some people can't. There's a lot of people that are going to struggle.
Making people aware of a major change like this is one thing, living through it, now that's another. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
A key committee at City Hall has just approved a plan to spend $350 million to build new affordable housing. The cash incentives are designed to get shovels in the ground on 18 projects currently stuck in development. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has those details.
As Toronto's housing crisis deepens, city councillors are facing difficult choices about how to address affordability. And a key city committee dug into a plan today aimed at getting 18 affordable housing projects unstuck from its development pipeline.
This is us turning a corner. For the first time in, call it 40 years, we're building the right housing for people who are struggling to get homes in the city of Toronto.
The city's planning committee would see it spend $350 million to provide incentives to builders. That cash would help cover the cost of high interest rates and inflation, which have stalled their projects. The city program would see builders eligible to receive up to $260,000 per unit. Mayor Olivia Chow says the city needs to step in.
Well, we are noticing fewer people actually constructing. We have given their approval and the permits to do so, but they're not doing it, which is why the city is stepping in as a public developer. So at a time when, because the interest rate's high and borrowing cost is high, the private sector is slowing down. That's when we are speeding up because we do have financing capability.
The city has set ambitious targets to build 65,000 affordable housing units by 2030. That will require billions in loans and grants from upper levels of government. The funding for this program will come from the city's capital budget. This housing advocate says the money will make a difference.
That helps cover the gap on interest rates and construction costs that have increased a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. And we're really working, I think, as a city now to try to move projects forward in a way that they weren't moving in the past.
Councillor Brad Bradford says more work must be done to help builders get shovels in the ground on all projects, not just affordable housing. Market projects help get more affordable housing built, he says.
And I think while this program really focuses on affordable, we need to do things and take steps and measures as a local government to make sure we're addressing the supply side and helping those market projects move forward.
City Council will have ultimate approval over the plan later this month. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto police are warning the public of a potentially fatal drug circulating around the Dufferin and Eglinton area after several people overdose. And police don't know what the drug is, but suspect it's an opioid. Advocates say not knowing is the norm now as the city's street supply becomes increasingly more toxic. Dale Manukduk has this story.
Toronto police say between Sunday and Tuesday in the Dufferin and Eglinton area, they responded to 4 separate overdose calls. 3 of the people, all adults, died.
I feel like the overdose is getting worse because since I've been here, in less than a year, I noticed that been 6 or 7 people get overdosed.
It's no surprise to Chris Williams, who owns a nearby juice bar. He says he tries to help out local drug users when he can by giving them food.
Several people that I know, I see all the time, I will be like, hey, where is so-and-so? They're like, oh, you got overdosed.
Police don't know what the drug is since it was used before they arrived, but it's suspected to be an opioid. It's becoming increasingly hard to determine what drugs are as the street supply becomes more and more contaminated. At the Toronto Drug Checking Service, they've analyzed over 800 samples this year.
So in 2024, of all fentanyl samples that we've checked, not a single sample has contained only fentanyl, which we think points to the level of contamination in the supply. So that means that not a single fentanyl sample met service users' expectations. Often they were contaminated with other central nervous system and respiratory depressants.
In a statement to CBC Toronto, the city's Associate Medical Officer of Health says when the drug supply is unpredictable and increasingly toxic, people who use drugs are more at risk of overdose because the drugs might be different or more potent than expected. We encourage people who use drugs to take safety precautions when using drugs from the unregulated drug supply. The drug checking service is one of those precautions, although it takes a full business day to turn around results for opioids.
So that people have an understanding, hey, I had an adverse event or reaction or overdose. What was in that sample? Or alternatively, that drug really worked for me. What was in it? And then they can use that information to advocate for themselves with their seller and with their healthcare providers.
Police are also encouraging caution and reminding people that if they do use drugs, to not use alone.
I think people should always carry naloxone, have somebody to buddy up with when they're using. The reality is the majority of people use alone in their own homes. There are people who need to use to get to their jobs, and there are people who just use alone because of stigma and discrimination.
While naloxone will reverse the opioids in event of an overdose, it won't counter the other contaminants in the drug. Advocates say until the unregulated drug supply is addressed, overdose deaths will continue at alarming rates. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Stephen Lecce made his first announcement in his new role today. He's now Ontario's Minister of Energy and Electrification. But critics are disappointed that despite a new name for the ministry and a new person at the top, the government's message hasn't changed. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop has more.
It doesn't look like much just yet, but it's the end of the initial phase of building a new nuclear reactor. Site preparations now complete.
Canada and the G7's first small modular reactor that is being built right here in this community.
Stephen Lecce heads a ministry with a new name, encompassing not just energy, but also electrification.
The emphasis for our ministry will be expanding affordable, reliable, and of course, clean energy.
But it won't all be clean energy. Lecce says the government will continue to look at building or expanding natural gas plants.
We will not pursue a path, an ideological path, that will deny some forms of energy when we need all of them to help fuel our economy because we are growing. There's no alternative. We need nuclear and natural gas and renewables to be part of our mix.
That doesn't go over well with environmental groups.
So the last thing that we should be doing when the world is on fire is ramping up the output of our dirty gas plants.
He says that's also going to mean more expensive electricity, and he's not a fan of building small nuclear reactors.
So Ontario's consumers and taxpayers are the guinea pigs for this foreign technology.
Now, only China and Russia have small modular reactors up and running, though other countries have them in the works. They're known as SMRs.
SMRs are new and shiny and exciting.
One researcher in the U.S. who focuses on green electricity options, in a recent report, found they're too expensive, too slow to build, and too risky.
Right now, the risks are all sort of upside down, where the company comes in and builds it and goes vastly over budget. And who ends up paying? You and me and all the other customers. The companies more or less get off scot-free.
He says wind and solar are much better, cheaper options. Minister Lecce says he's open to expanding all forms of energy production. Ontario Power Generation says the first SMR is expected to open in 2029 with capacity to power 300,000 homes. Lorena Redekop, CBC News, Clarington.
Canadian superstar Celine Dion has not performed in 4 years as she battles a rare neurological disorder. In an interview with Adrian Arsenault, the singer spoke about her health struggles, the emotional toll, and her fight to return to the stage. Here's a part of their conversation.
At the beginning, it was totally something light that would be, I would say, spasmodically in the throat.
So it
and
started
music.
with your voice?
It started in my voice, traveling on tour, and I started to feel a spasm, kind of somebody pressing back. So what it does in the vocal cords is that you feel, well, not normal, the stress, the panic. I started to compensate because I had a show that night.
Her first symptoms in 2008, going unexplained until a few years ago when she got her diagnosis of stiff person syndrome. Celine Dion hasn't performed for 4 years, has said very little. But when we met near her home in Las Vegas, she explained it has more than interrupted her career, it's threatened her life.
When you get in spasms so much, well, you don't remember everything. It can last a moment, it can last a few hours. You can break ribs because of the twisting and the spasm.
Maybe you've heard that stiff person syndrome affects 1 in a million people. The thing is, that's not quite right. Celine Dion's doctor says the numbers are more like 2 in 100,000, and they're changing all the time as more people get diagnosed and more people start to understand just what kind of cruel creature this really is.
Why cruel? Well, consider what Celine's doctor, Dr. Amanda Paquette, describes as the triggers setting off the sorts of spasms that have put Celine in hospital.
The triggers that we do see are emotional stress. It could be a positive stress, it could be a negative stress. Areas that are very crowded can trigger spasms. We can see it with light, with noise. So things that stimulate the nervous system.
Light, sound, emotion, everything that's fueled Celine Dion now seems to hurt her. Coping in the early days meant sometimes dangerous doses of Valium. She's learning more about managing the illness now and teaching her sons how to help. But this is a progressive disease that will continue to steal from her. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Las Vegas.
You can watch the full interview on our CBC News website. It's also streaming on the National's YouTube page, and there are more exclusive excerpts tonight on the National. Plus, the full interview will air on CBC television tomorrow night at 8 p.m. in all time zones, 8:30 in Newfoundland, and it will also replay over the weekend on News Network. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and other G7 leaders are meeting in Italy today, agreeing on a new deal to help Ukraine on the first day of the G7 summit. As Ashley Burke reports, they plan to use billions of dollars in frozen Russian assets to help Kyiv fund its ongoing war with Moscow.
The message from G7 leaders on day one: everything's falling into place, with a deal to help Ukraine in a new way. The Prime Minister promising a multi-billion-dollar loan to help Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's ongoing fight against Russia.
Canada is actually the first country to announce $5 billion of that will be a Canadian contribution.
They will help Ukraine not only on the battlefield, also in reconstruction.
Canada's contribution is part of a bigger $50 billion deal agreed to by all G7 leaders.
Today is a truly historic day.
The U.S.-led plan involves using the interest earned on profits from hundreds of billions of dollars of frozen Russian assets as collateral for a loan that would see countries get their money back.
To put that money to work for Ukraine, another reminder to Putin, we're not backing down.
Russian's foreign ministry immediately fired back, calling it an illegal initiative and warning retaliatory measures will be inevitable and extremely painful. With Russia making gains on the battlefield, experts say Ukrainian troops need a lot more help, including from Canada.
There's also a big gap between what's been committed and what Ukraine actually needs, which is essentially more of everything.
At a meeting of Ukraine's allies in Belgium, Canada's defense minister announced more than 130,000 rounds of small arms ammunition, a remote weapon system, and motors for attack rockets for Ukraine.
Canada is beginning shipments of a new fleet of 50 armored vehicles to Ukraine.
Canada also announced new sanctions against those supplying key technology to help Russia's military. Pope Francis is expected to join G7 leaders for discussions on the dangers of artificial intelligence on Friday. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Bari, Italy.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX plunged 263 points. The Dow dropped 65 points, and the Canadian dollar traded down to 72.75 cents US. We'll be right back. An Ontario woman with a storied career as a pilot is now hoping to share her experience and inspire others. Lola Reed Allen had a love for flying ever since she was a child, but pursuing aviation decades ago as a woman wasn't easy. Talia Ricci took flight with the author and pilot to learn more about her journey in the sky.
I knew I wanted to be a pilot during my very first flight ever. It was 1962, and I was 7. My mom and dad were taking us out west to see our grandparents for a family reunion. I had given it up because my parents' reaction to many things I wanted to do, they wanted me to, grow up, get married, have kids, and my father thought aviation was a foolish dream for a girl. My mother did too, for different reasons.
And here we're just visually checking
the surface of the aircraft to make sure there's no lumps or bumps.
So you did some flight lessons a little later in life, and then when did that blossom into a career?
Almost immediately. We took flying lessons. Our first lesson was March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and 3 months later I was a licensed private pilot. I continued to work at the bank doing the northern routes and flying at night and on the weekends in various places, North Bay, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie. And July of 1 year, 1979, I had my private license. March 1980, I got my commercial license. A month later, I got my instructor rating, quit the job at the bank, and started flying commercially. All right, and we're basically ready to go. Once I realized that I could control the airplane, it's such a feeling of empowerment and that you're really doing something worthwhile with your life. I just love flying.
You faced a couple of discouraging comments from your parents. Did some of that continue throughout your career at all?
It did. Even when I told my parents and grandparents that I was quitting my job and becoming a commercial pilot, their reaction was, oh, you can't do that. You're quitting a perfectly good job. Last year you left your husband. And by the way, you're going to be taking jobs from men who need them, which was pretty shocking. Throughout my career, I did have that kind of similar comments, taking jobs from men, or, oh, it's great that you're flying, but when you get married, you'll want to quit and have children. There were some encouraging comments. I mean, parents of little girls were typically really thrilled to see me in a cockpit. On the other hand, one time I was standing on a ramp near the airplane with the stripes, and the man said, oh, it's so great that we're going to have a stewardess, because that's what they were called then, a stewardess on the flight. What are you serving? And I said, well, you know, actually these stripes indicate that I'm one of the pilots. Well, he says, didn't you just borrow that jacket? And I said, well, would you ask that of a man? And he was kind of embarrassed, and I tried to be polite. It happened, and it's still happening. That's the really distressing thing. A woman will fly into an airport, perhaps where she's never known, and people will say, where's the pilot? You know, is your husband or boyfriend coming in too? Or you're sitting in the airplane, and they say, aren't you just keeping the seat warm? It's disappointing, and we need to change that.
Tell me a bit about some of the firsts that you achieved.
When I started flying, everybody, even my son, I already had a son, by the way, when I started taking flight lessons, everybody was male. I was the first female chief flying instructor at Waterloo Wellington Flight Center, the first female instructor at an airport in the interior of British Columbia, which was a great experience. I was also the first woman to fly on a Twin Otter 300 series on a regularly scheduled flight.
I understand you have a book coming out in September. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the book is entitled Highway to the Sky, An Aviator's Journey. It's not a story about my flight career, but it talks about some of the highs, some of the lows. It's really a vehicle to talk about women's issues and how difficult it is for women to, first of all, think about a career in aviation. And I'm not just talking about flying. It could be as an aircraft maintenance engineer, an avionics, which is the radios. It could be air traffic control. It could be a variety of things.
How do you hope to continue inspiring girls and women with your book and also the way you're out in the community now?
Visibility is the key. We have this motto that you can't be what you can't see. So if you see a female airline pilot or a female air traffic controller or a female maintenance engineer, and there are lots, you can think, well, I can do that. So what I do is I'm a member of the 99s, which was started in 1929 by Amelia Earhart and 98 other women. I'm also a member of the Canadian Women in Aviation and the International Women in Aviation. And what all of us do is we have mentorship programs, we have scholarships, we do outreach as well to schools, to service clubs. We have these conventions throughout the year. I thought that there were a lot more women flying. Now, I was right. There are a lot more women flying, but the percentage remains the same at a dismal 5 to 6%. So our numbers are increasing, we're a little bit more visible, but there's still the perception that it's not quite for women. Now, if the field is wide open for men, it should be just as wide open for women. So we call this an unmanned flight.
Yes.
It is Pride Month, and a new documentary is following the experiences of the first same-sex couples to get married in Ontario. CBC Toronto host Dwight Drummond sat down with some of the filmmakers and couples behind When You Find the One.
Everybody has a right to be in love with whoever they want, you know. I fell in love with a person, not necessarily a woman or, you know, a man or whatever. I fell in love with a person.
We'll start with why you want to share these love stories of these same-sex married couples.
Yeah, as a younger queer person myself, I've always felt kind of a disconnect with the stories of older people and how that ties into my own history. And just getting the opportunity to hear the stories of people who were able to marry after the law changed, and not just that, but also see how an older generation loves each other, something that I never got to see before this documentary was made, was just so special.
It's different than anything I'd ever felt before.
Not only did they get to marry each other, but just like seeing how they met and how their love evolved and where they are now.
These stories.
Oh my gosh.
You said it was life-changing.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Like I've never had such a life-changing experience. It was so beautiful.
Both of us were at the same dance together, which was the Mad Dance.
I hear this film was your idea.
It was.
What sparked it?
Well, with the advisory council, Ara came to us because he's the other co-chair. He said, does anyone have an idea for a grant proposal for an Ontario grant? And I said, well, I have this idea for a memory project. And oh, by the way, I'd also like to make a film because the 20th anniversary of the legalization of same-sex marriage is coming up. And he sort of went, okay.
And there we are.
There we are. We made sure that we had the cooperation of Anne and Elaine Vautour, who are the people, first two ladies. And yes, exactly.
The famous couple.
Yes, the famous couple.
We were the first lesbian couple to get legally married in the world, not just Canada.
I know when we even hit the 1,000 views after 2 days, I said to Rochelle, what have I done? I said, people who are seeing this who I've told my coming out story to my mother, like really intimate stories, but it's such an important thing for people.
It was very important to get the word out, and that
so we were very
lucky to get the opportunity to get married.
We're talking 1971. You know, you had to be very confident within yourself to come out, even to yourself.
How do you feel about being in this film and having this anniversary marked? Because years from now, maybe 20, maybe on the 50th anniversary, somebody's going to watch you there and say, hey, that was one of the people who back then helped us get to this point.
I participated because I realized we were a part of history. Yes. Do you know our marriage license still had bride and groom because City Hall wasn't ready for us? So when my partner went to City Hall to get the license, the woman at the clerk was so embarrassed, she said, who's the bride and who's the groom? And he was being quite the gentleman. He let me be the groom and he was the bride.
Oh, the wedding itself was fantastic. You know, so we picked 07, 07, 07.
We married for love, number one, but also for human rights.
That's what I want.
You know, like my friend Ron says, if you're straight, you don't need a marriage license, but if you're gay, you need it for those protections.
And we don't think of it like that.
You don't. And my wife, when she went to pick up the marriage certificate, it's actually in the film, she went to City Hall and she burst into tears. And the woman behind the counter said, you know, are you okay? What's the problem? And she said, well, I never thought I'd have the same rights as everybody else.
And you know what I love?
What?
Your T-shirt.
You love my T-shirt?
Full lesbian status.
Yes, lesbian status.
What do you want, especially during this Pride Month, the wider community to know about your love?
That there's nothing scary about it. I think that was one of the main things about making the film, was I wanted people to see that there was nothing scary about a lot of old people saying, I have been with this person for a long time and we wanted to have the commitment of showing it to the world that we're married. And for Rochelle and I, we've been together 27 years this month.
It shouldn't matter. If I love a man, what's the difference? And you should respect my love. I mean, the proudest thing I used to go around saying is, I'm married. Never thought that would happen.
Yeah.
It was never meant to be, right? Being gay, that was not an option.
I fell in love with Joan Elise 27 years ago, and I still Love the bones off her. Love the bones off her.
Today marks the 5-year anniversary of the Raptors winning the NBA title. That legendary 2019 playoff run bringing people from all across the city and the country, for that matter, together to celebrate. Greg Ross takes a look back at Toronto's journey to the championship.
For Raptors superfan Nav Bhatia, it's hard to believe that 5 years have passed since the Raptors won the NBA championship.
It feels like it was yesterday that we were in Oakland.
Curry lets it fly. Canada, the NBA title is yours.
On July 13th, 2019, the Raptors beat the Golden State Warriors in Game 6 to win the franchise's first ever Larry O'Brien trophy as NBA champions.
It gives me goosebumps still just talking about it, even though it has been 5 years.
Thousands of fans gathered outside of Scotiabank Arena to watch the game. Thousands more gathered in other cities right across the country as Canadians celebrated together.
There was a Jurassic Park all over Canada. Where does it happen? Only in Canada.
In Oakland, Nav Bhatia says he celebrated with fans from across Canada who were lucky enough to be at Game 6.
There were 3,000 of them behind our Raptors bench. After the game finished, everybody assembled behind the bench.
It was without a doubt one of the greatest moments in Canadian sports history, and many believe it was only made possible by a move the team made almost a year earlier. A trade that would send fan favorite DeMar DeRozan to the San Antonio Spurs in exchange for Kawhi Leonard.
I remember at the time it was devastating for Raptors fans. They were giving up DeMar DeRozan, a legendary icon for the organization. That move was a very risky decision to give up a player as talented as DeMar and to take back this unknown in Kawhi Leonard. People didn't even know if he was going to come to Toronto. People thought he didn't want to play in Toronto.
Not only did he come to Toronto, he quickly made the Raptors a championship contender. And if there was ever a doubt, it was erased in the second round of the playoffs when Leonard did this.
Kawhi up top, looks at the clock, turns the corner for the win.
That game-winning shot at the buzzer helped the Raptors beat the Philadelphia 76ers in Game 7, sending them to the conference finals.
And when that ball went in, I knew the basketball gods are with us.
The Raptors would go on to beat the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Final and then the Golden State Warriors in the championship series. In the 5 years since then, it's been a struggle. Most of the players and coaches have moved on.
The only guy remaining from that team is Chris Boucher, who essentially didn't play very much for that team.
The Raptors are definitely in a rebuilding stage, now relying on the next generation, led by players like Scotty Barnes and Grady Dick.
The fact that they were able to move on from some of those former players and start heading in a direction with a young core sets them on a pathway that makes sense toward a championship.
And I believe that we will, in the next few years, again be a candidate to win the championship.
Until that time comes, Raptors fans will always have the memories from 2019. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
That buzzer beater, eh? Colette, still chills.
I was at that game.
Oh my God, you were at that. Oh, I'm jealous. That must
Great
have been
memories,
incredible.
right?
Just electric
for
right?
all of us. Yeah. Some amazing conditions or times there. That's nice to think back on. Not so amazing, maybe, if you're trying to just enjoy the warm weather and get outdoors and relax. Well, that's kind of hard to do when we have a tornado watch that is in place. Keeping in mind, a watch means conditions are favorable. Okay, it's when there's a warning where you need to take cover and that danger is imminent. But it's a very large area in this watch, and it does come closer to the city. King City, Newmarket, you're included in the watch area, Orangeville and Aurora and Georgina, all in here in Uxbridge and Beaverton. But it's a vast area, and we've seen a lot of that energy, that kind of core energy, where we've gotten into warnings further north or at times east as the afternoon and evening has progressed. At the moment, though, we do have not only severe thunderstorm watch areas in yellow, but some warnings that are in place. So we've been kind of watching this around the Bruce Peninsula and Tobermory through that region with some of these stronger cells, Parry Sound over towards Huntsville and Bracebridge through that region. This has been kind of expanded towards Port Carling as well. So some stronger cells still in play there. And, you know, there's still the heat, the humidity, the sun hasn't set yet, and we've got this cold front riding through. So there you can see that line that's a little bit more organized. A few cells, kind of renegade cells ahead of that popping up, one just kind of showing up towards Kitchener. So there's a chance we could get an isolated cell ahead of that main line coming down closer into the GTA. But what I'm more concerned about is this active weather here through the Bruce Peninsula and Georgian Bay. If I throw the lightning strikes on there, can you believe that? Yes, just massive amount of lightning and that we're seeing here, wind gusts that may exceed 90 kilometers an hour, but also keeping in mind that risk of this hail developing to toonie or even golf ball size. So as this plays out, for now we're doing fine closer to the city and the lakeshore, but through the evening hours, getting past about 8 o'clock, the timing really looks like between about 8 and 10, 11 o'clock. The remnants of these will go through. Could still have some stronger cells in there, so you do need to be aware of that. But I think it's going to be quite a bit weaker. Still, we're dealing with temperatures at 30, and those humidex values in the mid-30s will cool back down for tomorrow.
Okay, good to hear. Thanks so much, Colette. And that is our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. There is no 11 p.m. newscast tonight due to NHL playoffs. We will